Dick, need no introduction. Our departed friend Les Bowen used to talk volumes about you, and I'm sure he would have smiled upon today if he had seen this conference, right, ML? I think so. So I want to introduce our premier speaker today, Dick McNamara from NAVSEA. Dick?
Oh, thank you very much. What I thought I would do to try to set a little context for the small business community is talk a little bit about NAVSEA and what we do and buy. I don't know how many of you actually do business with us. How many do? Let's see. Okay, well, you kind of know us pretty good. But I thought I would give this perspective. Last week, the Office of Navy Research, who runs the SBIR program within Navy, hosted what they call a Prime Conference. And they had a series of panels. The Raytheon folks were there, as were all the other real big guys. And it was trying to convey to the primes changes that are going on in the program and why they need to be more interested and engaged in SBIRs. And so I thought that might be an interesting thing to let you know what we're saying about small business and SBIR in particular to the big business. And I'll touch a little bit on some of the things that we see as change that are ongoing within the acquisition community already, and I guess we're going to be seeing more acquisition changes coming out of the National Defense Authorization Act. So let me do that. Oh, I guess I'm controlling the slide. Sorry. So this is the reason you got me here. Is my last 4 years? Well, I was kind of I had a 40-year career with Navy. Started as a co-op student, went to Northeastern over here, and worked at the old New London laboratory before it got bracked in the mid-90s. I left there in about 1974 and went to D.C. for 3 months. Well, 3 months to 3 years to forever. But it was a package deal. I got married, bought a house, got a cat and a dog, all in 1 year back in the 70s. But NAVSEA buys big things. And so people often wonder, well, where do I fit? I know you buy radars from Raytheon, you buy submarines from EB, you buy carriers from Newport News. How do I fit? Where do I go into this? And I'll tell you, from being in a bureaucratic environment, that's a lot of what we used to hear back in the early 90s when I first got involved in SBIR. People said, well, what are you going to do with SBI, a small business on a big ship, on a nuclear submarine? And before long, in about 1991, I wrote my first topic, had some success with it, got more engaged with the program. Back in those days, the Virginia program was putting a lot of money into the SBIR coffers, and I wanted to get every nickel I could back out of it to support the program. And as a result, this list shows that the number of small businesses through the SBIR programs that have contributed to the success of the Virginia program. In about June of 2006, we actually broke the $1 billion mark, and hence the name of the $1 billion man. But the point is that if the nuclear submarine community can figure out how to get small business engaged in using our tax money that goes into the SBIR program for the benefit of the program, so can everybody else. And that's why I get out, and that's why I use this pitch. Since I retired in 2007, I'm happy to say that subs has continued to grow. Right now, I believe they have over $2 billion, about $2.3 billion in transitions, and hope to see that continue. We've got Whitney Taylor here, who is the program manager for SBIR within Team Sub, and just as Ryan is for all the Navy directorates. The folks that are here are the people who make things move. Some of us are contractors, and some of us are civil servants. And Ryan and Whitney are the civil servants. Frank and Emily and Jen and myself are the contractors. We're the helpers these days. So why are they important to you is the money that gets allocated into Team Sub, for example, Whitney's the guy who figures out what's the priority, what gets funded and what doesn't get funded. It's the goal of that is to make sure that the contributors to the program get their problems addressed and solved. So that's the genesis of some of the topics you're going to see today, and I'll touch a little bit on that. So let me move to the next slide. So when we buy big things, what does that mean? Well, it means that we have lots of performance parameters. We write operational requirements documents that have key performance parameters in them, and those key performance parameters need to be satisfied for us to be deemed successful. As a result, there are many performance requirements, there are many derived requirements, I'll touch on that in a moment, and as a result, there are substantial SBIR budgets as well, because big programs have big R&D. DD-1000 was an example that probably during the 90s, early aughts, they had a lot of money. Virginia has. Right now you see the Ohio Replacement Program funding a lot of the SBIR efforts that are going on. So as a result, you get many topics that are being generated by these big programs, and the good news for the small businesses is that in SBIR, those are the landing pads for your technology. That's where your new welding technique or a new anti-fouling technique or a new radar power supply all will find a home. It's a great opportunity to interact with SBIR companies for the program offices, but it's also a great, kind of like icebreaker conversation thing when you get to go see your sponsors of your topics. And I can't say enough about SBIR, particularly winning, but even competing and participating in groups like this is a great way to get to understand how to deal with your customers and understand the bureaucracy. One of the reasons we're here is to try to put faces, phone numbers, emails for you to be able to have an interaction with the customers. And the last item is I just looked at some statistics we had on a chart, and we had NAVSEA has advertised 372 topics in about the last 7 years. We made 862 awards to phase ones. Everybody there is a winner, not because they got 150K or whatever it was for phase one, but the SBIR rules say that once you win one, there's no time distance, no time between a phase one and a phase two. So while everybody wants to win the phase one and go right into phase two, you could wait 5 years and then have somebody reach back. And I'm going to talk about how you can use maybe that inventory of topics that you thought didn't go anywhere and wouldn't be of any value to you, how you can use them. So I'll touch on that, and that's a real value to the program managers. The topics you're going to see today are or you probably looked at already. They came out Friday. Are written by program offices. So these are people with real problems that need to be solved out of the NAVSEA community. And so they actually have an end use in mind. You'll see several of them that, probably border on engineering development. So think about that. The topics you're going to see to bid on are the ones that do have a place in mind for them. About 50% will go to phase two. On average, we get about 15 proposals per topic. We will award one winner for about every 8 proposals that comes in, and then 50% of those will go to phase two. We try to make winners better winners. If you get into phase two, we participate in the SBIR Technology Transition Program to try to help make sure you're prepared, understand the bureaucracies, help you write business development plans, and then there's usually a coming out party. Historically, it was in June down at Crystal City. I think they're going to have it there, I think, again, or maybe they're going to lump it in with the NDIA conference earlier. We recognize that the topics that we write now have to bake for a while, that they're not going to be ready tomorrow. Between the topic being advertised, the phase 1, and then going to phase 2, completing a phase 2, you're 3 to 5 years down the road. But that's 3 to 5 years of having to have a dialogue with your technical points of contact, the program managers, the people who are going to be making the money decisions and the technology decisions to see if your technology is going to land on these programs. And we advocate the use of reachbacks for timely application, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So a reachback is when an older innovation can be used to solve new problems. When people get a phase 1 and they don't go to phase 2, the world hasn't ended. Oftentimes we just don't have enough money to take the companies that were doing well in phase 1. We don't have enough money to go to phase 2. Or sometimes we see that we were just too far ahead of our time, and the landing pad where we might apply that technology is moved out to the right. So there's a variety of reasons why things may not get funded. It doesn't mean that they were good ideas and very innovative. So as a result, the places that I found use of these fall into several categories. One is risk reduction. I can't tell you how many times I ask people, do you have a risk program in your program? And they'll go, yeah, I got a risk program. I said, do you have a funded risk program? Well, nobody has a funded risk program. That's where SBIR can come in. By looking at older topics, whether they've gone to phase 2 or not. You look at older topics and say, can I restart this? That idea that was for a really small, high power supply that that didn't make the cut 5 years ago. Hey, that helps me solve today's problem. So I can reach back, and literally within about 6 months, you can be under contract and working that. It used to be a lot faster than 6 months. It used to be like 2 months, but now we got all this help from Congress, so it gets a little longer. But that's the point. And remember, it doesn't have to be the explicit effort that you put together on phase 1s. It can be anything that's a logical extension or derivation from that product or process. So think about that. So I always tell people that I could probably build a submarine for the 862 winners that occurred during this period of time with using the logical extension aspects of it. But anyway, risk reduction is one. Establishing second sources, particularly if you're going to go into a production mode where you need to have a surge capacity. Also, how solving obsolescence. Government often has a time where you could go to a prime, who then goes 2 or 3 tiers down each time with G&A and fee being added, before you go back to the guys actually solving the obsolescence issue. Whereas, we can use this to go direct using phase 2 money. So it's kind of like free money to solve a problem, and you also get to test drive a small business. And ultimately, are you familiar with the CRP program, Commercialization Readiness? You used to hear the term a phase 2.5. More than a phase 2, but not quite a phase 3. That's another area where you can use this. You can reach back, give them $750K or $1 million of phase 2 money, recognize you might have a winner, then you can add program money to that and get additional R&D money from SBIR as well as program money applied. So you can turn a phase 2 into a $4.5 million contract now. But you have to, have that relationship. You have to get that confidence built up from your customer, and the product that you're working on product or process needs to be the logical extension of what you originally started. So that's a pretty powerful tool, and it's powerful to the program managers. A couple of examples I threw together here. One is a key performance parameter of like a new ship would be quieting. So there's a couple of different ways. Somebody here worked on damping tiles, etc. We're always looking for maybe a cheaper one that new mechanisms for holding them on the hull. Maybe they're lighter. They don't compress as much. A variety of different parameters. But we could look for new damping materials or just quieter machinery to ensure that the quieting capability of that ship is going to be better. That would be a KPP in a direct effort to that. You can have a derived requirement. Let's say you had a complex system, EW, sonar, whatever, and you build one, but like many things, engineers will build systems by engineers for engineers, but they're not really suitable. So while they may be effective in doing what their job is, they're not suitable because it's not intuitive and sailors can't operate it. So SBIR, an ideal way to automate the processes, to reduce the complexity of the job. Or maybe you build in an operator trainer so you get higher performance and proficiency. Well, those things are certainly things that SBIR companies can work on. So the point is that you need a General Dynamics or somebody at that level to be able to build the whole sub, do the nuclear work, etc. But about everything that goes on it can be done, I think, by SBIRs. That's what my 25 years in the SBIR business has shown me. You know, companies of 499 people are pretty impressive companies, and they still qualify for all SBIRs. So the last item was cost reduction. Other than your proposal where you originally win and getting your product to work, the most important tool you can have is a business case analysis. And you don't have to have a real elaborate one. It's basically, here's what you do today and what it costs, and here, if you have my product, here's what you'll do and how much less it's going to cost. Anything that you can put in those terms will have a way to a platform. We use modeling tools, finite element analysis modeling tools, so we don't have to do shock testing, so we can do better modeling of noise attenuation on a ship, for example. They avoid us having to do a lot of elaborate testing, sometimes destructive. Unique test designs. Reliability is a big deal, always has been, will be. And we're finding that there's not a lot of people who know how to design accelerated life testing. And so we use SBIR companies to do that for us now, and to conduct the test as an independent entity. And then some of the more automated efforts. We use some automated testing when we, on subs, when we do ship installations for alterations. Rather than have teams of 4 guys, 3 shifts a day over the week, weekends and weeks, you can turn on you can just turn on the system and let it do a self-test on its own with 1 guy on the shifts. So they're, better, faster, cheaper. That's kind of the mantra that we have, and there's a number of applications. Now, everything I've been talking about here is, I kind of look at things through a submarine lens. But you've got it on a DD-1000, on an aircraft carrier, I mean literally a floating city, 5,000 people with an Air Force and a Navy all on board one platform. Just think about how your products and processes can be applied to make that more effective and life better. At NAVSEA, and I would say across the Navy for sure, we work pretty hard at trying to enable opportunities for the SBIR winners. What we do is sporadically, I'll say I did some of this back in when I was still wearing the civil service badge, but where you start using our large competitions for big things that the big companies go after, we require and evaluate prior for award small business plans. How are you going to engage small business in the acquisition of a submarine or a big system? How do we, now does that ensure there's going to be an avenue to get an your SBIR into their system? No. But I think SBIR gives a fair competitive advantage by having won them, having done legwork up front, established relationships with the primes and the customer, and be in a position so that when they go out looking for that 30% subcontracting, that you're on that list. The new Department of Defense instruction 5000.02, which is kind of the rule book on the major acquisition programs, now requires at milestones that program managers establish goals for small business participation and SBIR and STTR participation in programs. So every milestone that we have to go up to our acquisition executive, who's Sean Stackley, the Assistant Secretary of the Navy for Research, Development, and Acquisition, we have to present that to him. We have to give him a plan, and then we have to report every year and on every milestone how we're performing on that plan. Large industry is also going to be required to be reporting on SBIR and STTR technologies employed in their programs. That's a brand new one, and we're trying to sort through how that's going to be done. But the burden's going to be on them to be able to point out what they're using. This is all coming from above because at the Department of Defense level, they've seen 30 years of SBIRs as a large investment to the tune of not only $30 billion, I think our budgets now are about $1.5 billion in the Department of Defense that goes into SBIR and STTR. So they're looking for that return on investment, and that makes people count. So program managers are going to be concerned about it, acquisition executives, as well as large industry, the users. So we do, we try to employ open system architectures, so you can do form, fit, and function drop-ins with SBIR products, so that the landing pads are prepared for the successful SBIR work, whether it be hardware or software. That we are trying to establish a technology insertion budget so that there's funding to do that technology insertion as you go through the program. And we also encourage and will support your participation in the Rapid Innovation Fund program, which is a competitive but a very, how many people are participated in the RIF program? Okay. It's kind of nice. You can write the very short white paper. You'll know whether they like it or don't and whether you'll get it funded or not, but it's not a huge burden to propose on. And then the National Shipbuilding Research Program. That's a separate program run. It's a forum where you can go to and basically get the picture wares or talk to people and show, I think it's 13 shipyards across the country who participate in that. And that's run out of NAVSEA, a woman by the name of Christy Goff who runs that program. So we try to enable opportunities for your SBIR projects, your successes, to find their way to ships, even if they're not directly on the ones you're working on. And then, so what's SBIR offer? Most people, the primes, often think about, well, it offers small businesses opportunity, what's it do for me? Well, the ones that have been around the program for a while realize that, hey, it offers program management and prime contractors an avenue to get access to funding, to get one of their teammates or subcontractors some extra money to help the program be a success, to bring innovation, apply all the money. I mean, right now we're talking 3% of the R&D budget going into SBIR. 3% of $1 billion is a lot of money. And as a program manager, I always wanted to make sure I got not only mine, but I wanted to get the lazy guy who would spend his money too, other programs. So test drive small business, I think that's the great part. There's familiar faces here and there's some brand new faces, which is great. I do a lot of the outreach effort for the NAVSEA SBIR program, and it's just amazing the number of companies and technologies that are being looked at. And they all come trying to figure out, where's the right door into the Department of Defense? And in this case, we brought the doors here, and it's the doorway into at least NAVSEA. And we've got, I think it's 37 topics this year that we advertised. So hopefully we'll get you'll leave here knowing name, face, phone number, maybe an email of the guys, people who are interested in your products or who should be interested in your products. And in the end, we're trying to get non-traditional participants. And what the Congress did when they reauthorized the SBIR program more recently, 2011 or 12, they came back and said, hey, we want you to get more women and small businesses engaged. We want more minorities engaged. They also talked about under-participating states. Now, Massachusetts certainly is not under-participating. They're always in the top 5. But I think Rhode Island, just because of the number of people in the state, has a hard time making that top 25. So, one of the reasons SBANE was very attractive for us to come up to is you represent New England. And so we kind of try to hit all 6 states. I don't know if we got anybody from Maine this year. Did we get anybody from Maine? I think we had one last year. How about Vermont? Okay. Rhode Island? All right. Let's see. Connecticut does pretty well. Massachusetts has always done well. And New Hampshire, I guess, does pretty good too. So you've got a lot of strong support. Senator Shaheen runs the Small Business Committee on the Senate side. And I know, what's the name of the senator who took over for Kennedy's old seat? Markey. Yeah. He was very active in it on the House side. I don't know if he's as active or what committee assignments he's got on the Senate side, but Massachusetts has got a tradition of doing very well on the programs and getting lots of support on Capitol Hill for the programs. And New England at large works pretty well together. So I guess that's really all I wanted to pass along. So now you hear, that's a story that we tell to the primes. And I thought it would be a good context, a good perspective for you to see how at least we envision SBIRs. We envision them where we can take them forward and make them government furnished materials, or we can broker arrangements and make you a subcontractor to our primes, whether it be big electronic systems like a Raytheon or Lockheed would have, or whether it's with the shipbuilders that are building our new ships and LCS carriers, submarines. So, yeah.
Could you talk briefly about the subcontracting primes, what's going on in NAVSEA contracts, how that's evolving, the awareness of how that's evolving?
Good point. The NAVSEA recently came out with shouldn't NAVSEA say NAVSEA. Sean Stackley, who's the Assistant Secretary for Acquisition within Navy, started a year ago starting to recognize that he had a series of roundtables. I guess there was at least one up in this area where he invited small businesses in to hear what was right, what was wrong, and how come could we do to get more engaged. And he came back and he put a memo out earlier this year directing all the PEOs and commands to develop small business strategies. And included in that strategy is, what are you going to do to get small business and use SBIRs? He has made it clear that he wants to have every deputy program manager of a major acquisition program not just be the deputy and worry about small business, but he wants them to be the advocate for small business. So, the deputy program manager for the Virginia class program is Lisa Bonachik-Dorick. And so she's got the burden now of just not trying to run an organization, the second largest acquisition program in defense, but now it's on her yearly performance objective to say, how are you doing and what are you doing on small business? As are about 68 other people within Naval Sea Systems Command and PEO structure. For those of you who are going after Nav Air work or SPAWAR work, they've got the same requirements levied on them. So we're trying to figure out how to do it. The strategy was prepared. It's going to include more outreach. I think the work plan that's now in generation will be very specific relative to goals, assignments on percentages, and we're going to start counting things. If you said you were going to get 10%, well, we're going to expect you to get 10%, of your work. That'll be direct contracting, and we recognize that a lot of areas, particularly with large shipbuilders, there's a lot of things the government does not want to get in the middle of. We do not want to get into welding rods for shipbuilders as government furnished equipment. We want them to buy welding rods from whoever of you or is going to produce them. But when it comes to maybe a component that goes on a sonar system that we're government furnishing to the shipbuilder, that's an ideal time for direct contracting. So, there is a tipping point where how much does the government get engaged with small business, particularly in the GFE, versus just levying requirements for small business participation that are evaluated criteria for award. And then usually to ensure that that's executed, you either have a penalty or an incentive. So the goal, a quick C story, back in after the Women-Owned Small Business Outreach, EB had told me that there just aren't enough women-owned small businesses that fit into the shipbuilding community. And so I said, okay. So we went out and we ran 3 sequential women-owned small business outreach conferences down at Sweetbriar College, a women's college. At the end of that, they had 210 companies that sold things from metals, exotic metals, to computers, to educational systems. I mean, just a whole variety. We then sat down and negotiated a sole source contract for 6 Virginia subs. We included a $1 million bonus per ship, incentive fee that said if you meet 5% minority, 5% women-owned, and 40% small business subcontracting through your primes, from the primes, that they could earn the $1 million bounty. So they had a $6 million kitty. 5 years later, they delivered, they earned 4.8 of that. They more than doubled the women-owned small business participation to like 6.6%. They missed on the 8A companies. They got to 4.8 out of 5, which was an improvement, but not enough to earn that. And they went from a standard average of about 35% to 54% in small business subcontracting. So I had a lot of people look at me and say, well, I hope you're really proud. We just spent $4.8 million to say you got more women-owned business in the program. And I said, no, you missed the point. I moved $450 million from big business into the small business column. And those are competitively procured, but they opened up the aperture to let small business participate. On average, I'm thinking I'm saving between 10 and 20% small business competitors versus big business competitors. And so if I take 10% of $450 million, that's a $45 million cost savings. And it only cost me 4.8 to get that. So, I want to make sure you understand that both small business at large and SBIR in particular are not socioeconomic when it comes to shipbuilding, building these weapon systems, et cetera. We're all held accountable to deliver products that satisfy the need. But, going small business, I think helps save. And depending on the incentive structures you put in your contracts, that works. So since then, just as an aside, EB had a subsequent contract. They really didn't do any better, and so I think that incentive's off the table. But, downstream, I use that as an example so Raytheon can sit down and negotiate incentives like that when they sit down on their contracts. And maybe with Ohio replacement, when that starts getting built up, there'll be a new opportunity to get more small business engaged, particularly after the initiatives that Mr. Stackley's starting.